Ladies and gentlemen, can you hear me back there? Is this working? Yes? Yep. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for attending this session. My name is Mark Rachovides. I'm President Emeritus of Euromines, and Euromines, of course, passes its thanks and compliments to both the Commission and the organisers of this event for giving us the opportunity to bring you all together. The subject matter I will not labour in detail, but in order to effect the green transition, there are, of course, two elements, supply and demand. They are interlinked, and the question is, how do we enable the change by resourcing both elements appropriately? This will touch upon various aspects. It's not a straightforward discussion about finance. It's a question of what are we actually going to do with the finance, what type of finance is appropriate, what are the political issues that are being dealt with, if you like, both globally and on the European scale, and how should we address those in a way that fulfills the mandate that we are given. We're going to talk a little bit about the mining sector and also its relationship particularly with the renewable energy sector. We have representatives of all of those groups here. I'm not going to introduce everyone. They are very conveniently sitting in the order of their pictures. If you'd like to learn about them and their biographies, feel free to network with them afterwards, but otherwise just read up on them in the conference materials. So, in terms of a format, what I'm going to do is after this introduction, allow each of the participants an intervention based loosely on a question that I will pose to each of them. Then we'll have some sort of response, depending on what they say, of course, with some interaction. And then hopefully we'll have ample time for a question and answer session from the audience here and online. Subjects to put on the table will include, and I have some notes of my own, please forgive me. Visibility, I suppose, would be a very good way of dealing with that. We have to talk in terms of being aware of what we're actually trying to achieve. We can talk a little bit about how we've done things in the past. We talk in terms of paying the right price. What are the trade-offs that we need to be looking at? How honest do we need to be with ourselves? We talk very conveniently about our responsibility to society and to each other. And some people call that the ESG dimension. That's a very awkward phrase to my mind, but we need to be aware of the total cost of what we do, both on the demand side and on the supply side, and what we need to do to mitigate that. So in other words, we need to talk about, are the benefits of the green transition, such as solar panels, renewable energy as a whole, electric vehicles, do they justify the social and other costs that we are proposing to incur? And how do we mitigate those costs? So we can talk a little bit about mitigating risk, ensuring supply, looking at the relationship between the different ends of the supply chain, and about finance. So I'm going to move straight on to the impulse statements. I'm going to follow the order that people are seated in based upon who's closest to me. That does not signify any favoritism or anything like that. So yes, Mark, it does. And thank you very much for the check earlier. So I'm going to start with Mark Mawhinney from the European Investment Bank. First of all, I'd probably just tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you do, because I don't know if everyone here is familiar with the work of the European Investment Bank. But I could ask you a very long question. Lots of people, for example, in the context of this debate, and this debate is part of a much bigger series of discussions, lots of people wanted to talk about the mandate of the European Investment Bank, and I don't think it's appropriate to ask you that question, but I'm just putting it there because lots of people want to talk about it. But what I'd like to ask you is, what do you think the role is for the public sector in financing supply chains in Europe? And can we expand a little bit beyond to say, let's just give money to do this? So I throw that to you. I'll give you 2 to 3 minutes, maybe a little bit more. And Mark, thank you very much.
Okay, I'm assuming you can hear me. It's quite hard to, yeah, okay, Fine. As Marcus just said, I need to give you a little bit of context. I am, despite what it says up there, I am now the lead advisor in innovation and competitiveness. But up until 2 weeks ago, I was the former head of the Sustainable and Digital Industries division within the bank. Now, the European Investment Bank is a bank that does investment volumes of about 60 billion a year. It has about 5,000 employees. The team that I ran did about 6 billion a year, and it focused almost exclusively on industrial decarbonisation, critical raw materials, the supply chain, but the supply chain right from extraction through to OEMs, gigafactories, all of that. They concentrated on that. As I said, up until last year, they were doing a volume of about 6 billion. This year, they're projected to do 8 billion. So what I would say is that first and foremost, what that suggests to me as an observation is that there is a growing demand, and it's quite clear there is a growing demand in this sort of area. The team that focused on due diligence, particularly on the economic and technical side of the projects that come in that we looked at. And one of the things that I would say in response to your second part of your question is about trade-offs. I think if I was to put 2 points, two words that were constant on a day-to-day basis in that work that we did, it is about trade-offs, and it is also about a transition. There is an understanding, in that sort of team, there's an understanding that industry wants to move. We see a lot of positive desire. We also see a positive desire from co-investors as well, because another part of the European Investment Bank, which I don't think everybody's aware of, is that we tend to co-invest. We don't invest by ourselves. So in order for us to move forward with investments, we need the investment community to be bought into this as well. Okay, so that's a bit of the context. In terms of your question, you did say about mandates. There's a lot of talk in Brussels about how they want the bank to change its mandate. There's all sorts of ideas out there. I think I've captured about 3 or 4 this morning already. But I can't, there's no point in me talking about that because I'm an operations guy. The mandate, if it ever changes, will be changed by the board. The board is the 27 finance ministers of the member states and the Commission. So the Commission itself is only 1/28 of the shareholding, but the member states have the majority say at the end of the day. So that's why I can't speak about mandates. In terms of whether the public sector has something to give, yeah, it depends on what part of the public sector. EIB is a bank, so there is a role for us in the signalling effect we have in terms of getting involved in investments when they are suitable investments. And of course, within the the public sector, you also have national government, European level institutions. They have a role to play as well, but it is as part of a full picture. I don't think we can do what we need to do by legislation alone. I don't think we can do it by subsidy, and I don't think we can do it through one bank like the European Investment Bank.
Mark, thank you very much. You've raised all sorts of questions that we will come back to later, I hope. Sitting next to Mark is Niklas Johansson, Senior Vice President from LKAB. LKAB is the largest iron ore producer in Europe. It's a company that is renowned for setting standards. Recently, your chief executive, Jon Mostrom, who's also my successor as president of Euromines, made a very valid and I think for some people painful point to say that Europe has exported environmental footprints while importing raw materials. And this is something we need to confront and change. Mining's a long-term business by its very nature. So where exactly would you say our industry is today in terms of meeting the demands for what we now call and demand to be sustainable raw materials?
Oh, that's of course a question with many depths. To give some context, you said we are the largest mining company. Our company mine 85% of all the iron ore mined in the European Union, but it only takes care about around 20% of the steel industry's need for iron ore. The rest is imported with very high standards when it comes to this. We've also developed a hybrid technology with our partners in the steel industry, SSAB and Vattenfall energy industry, to make fossil-free steel, and launched our strategy to basically, with all our iron ore, we're going to reduce the oxygen from it in order to cut carbon dioxide emissions. And with our kind of size, that amounts to, well, the amount of carbon dioxide emissions that the country of Sweden has. So that's our plan going forward. This is what we're going to do. But I think it's also looks at this kind of thing because Europe, more or less, we produce around 2 to 3% of the metals and minerals in the world, but we use for our own consumption and for our industry's export around 20-30%. That's a very, very big shift and very big difference there. And mining does have an environmental impact. That's not something you can close your eyes at. Mostly when it comes to, we operate very large, the world's two largest underground iron ore mines in the world. Much smaller than when you look at the open pit, but still, this is something we are driving at all the time because we cannot conserve the structure we are at today. We also, earlier this year, and that's another area we're looking into very much, we announced that we found Europe's largest deposit of rare earth elements. We're looking at neodymium, praseodymium needed for electric cars, wind turbines. And we, as a mining company, have been looking at this, of course, saying that we know there's not going to be enough materials being mined in order to meet the demand of the electrification. That we can see that very clearly. But it's also a business that takes a very long time from when you have found something to when you can actually have a product to provide to your customers. And this is an extremely difficult situation that Europe is in. And on top of that, the need we have for change and to supply the demand from all the green industries, we have the geopolitical issues as well. So those are some of the things, and basically we've closed our eyes to our imports and said that we don't want it here, but we want the products, we want the consumption. We also have to face what will it mean and what will it look like if we want this future.
Niklas, thank you very much. Again, you've put a number of issues on the table for us to hopefully discuss with a wider audience later. Part of the context is that, as you've said, Europe is part of a global scenario, that we both import and export to competitors, friends, call them what you will. But other countries are also responding with their own actions to the green transition. People talk a lot about the Inflation Reduction Act and other policy instruments being deployed in the United States. Comparisons to that are something we can talk about. There's also been a lot of talk that the European Union has been very slow, and that even today neither the public sector nor the private sector is doing enough. I think we need to give that a little bit of context and to understand, these rather large statements. How do we actually navigate our ways through that to actually have something concrete? And to do that, I'm going to ask Nanna Maria, who is from FLSmidth, an equipment manufacturer, and to ask you, you work together with mining companies and the downstream sector. How do you think we can raise standards together, and what market signals do you hope to see towards achieving a better future?
Thank you. So first of all, I would like to explain a little bit about FLSmidth's role in the mining value chain. FLSmidth is a equipment and technology provider. We are a full flow sheet provider, meaning we provide equipment from when you crush and grind and mill the rock, and then you process the ore into a waste material or the final product. So this is a very energy and water intensive process. We know that, and we have committed ourselves to develop solutions that can enable the mining companies and our customers to run a emission zero mine in 2030, meaning zero emissions and zero wastewater. And we're doing this in partnership with universities, EIT, our customers. We have also partnered with, for instance, Coppermark, which sets out a framework for how you do sustainable mining. And many of the solutions we have developed are already proven and exists. FLSmidth leads the industry in sustainable lithium spodumene extraction these days. So all in all, Europe actually has a leadership within sustainable technology for mining, which is not that well known to many. And one key hurdle we see in adaptation or adoption of this technology is the lack of financing. There's also you can say, long-term permitting. But we do see a lack of financing. We need the sustainable raw materials to go into the low carbon energy production. And we need this low carbon energy production to decarbonize the mining industry. So it's actually a very sophisticated ecosystem. But it all starts with the mining companies. And sustainable mining does come at a cost. So you could say what we would like to see is definitely financing solutions that would, or finance instruments that would come online. We would like to see that the Critical Raw Material Act is supplemented with funds. We are definitely eyeing at the IRA, which provides tax credits. It provides direct loans to mining companies. They are also eyeing mines outside the US where they could secure the offtake. And as you said, we will fall short in supply. The IRA has also been really good at stimulating the demand side, and there's no doubt that we will have we stand in front of a mining boom with very, very increased demand, but we are also standing in front of a market with scarce liquidity. And we're doing our best to change the perception of mining and to keep banks and financial institutions interested in financing mining and making it attractive again. But we would definitely like to see some finance instruments come online, lower permitting, the EU taxonomy also being implemented. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Nanna Maria. Talking a little bit now about the demand side. The whole impetus for this growth in demand is our need for net zero. And the primary driver to the great green transition is renewable energy. Everybody talks about this. The whole of this event is about this. Renewable energy is our hope. That's a different conversation. We have two representatives. I'm going to ask Raffaele first, who's going to talk about the solar sector. So a few years ago, I went to an industrial technologies conference and I said, do you mind? Is it important to you where your inputs come from? Are you interested in sustainable raw materials? This was, I think, 2016. The answer was no. Unequivocally, no. All we're interested in price. So I ask you today, in 2023, how relevant is the sustainability factor in the supply or sourcing of raw materials in producing solar panels?
Thank you. Interesting that you asked that in 2016, which I think was the rock bottom year for European solar markets. I think it was in the range of 4 to 5 gigawatts, to my memory. Last year we installed 40 gigawatts, so roughly 10 times what used to be. So good job. Now, having said that, sustainability has been, is, and I hope will remain being a key component for the competitive advantage of solar energy. And that can be shown in the public acceptance we see for solar energy. According to numerous surveys across the EU, solar is the most accepted or supported energy technology across all generating technologies. And the reason is that it does already a good job when it comes to sustainability. So it's already well performant on carbon footprint, on land use and biodiversity impact, on ecosystems preservation, and so on and so forth. Now, having said that, we are expecting and we aim to get a quite large growth in solar capacity deployed in Europe and worldwide. So we reached the terawatt scale globally last year when it comes to total installed capacity. The EU has the target to get 750 gigawatts of solar deployed by 2030. Actually, we think we're going to overshoot that target and land at around 900 gigawatts. And that needs to come with an improved sustainability performance, of course. Now, if you look at the life cycle of solar products and energy production, the use case is pretty good. Hardly any emissions when it comes to carbon footprint. On biodiversity, we have good practices that actually enhance biodiversity, so doing a good job there. End of life, also very good characteristics that allow for recycling up to 90% of the weight, so pretty good job as well. The most interesting environmental hotspots are at the manufacturing stage, especially at the upstream level of the value chain. So that's definitely something that the industry is looking at and trying to improve those carbon footprint performance. However, that also comes, because you mentioned earlier the ESG as a whole, because sustainability is not only environmental sustainability. If we look at social and governance, that's probably one of the most interesting aspects where the solar value chain needs to work further and increase the transparency. And how do we do that? So there's a couple of legislative initiatives from the Commission that are going to play a role in this sense for all ESG aspects. One is the PV eco-design, and here I'm not talking about the eco-design for sustainable product regulation, but under the current framework, provisions for eco-design on PV are set to come in early 2024, at least the final version agreed by co-legislators. And that will already set minimum sustainability requirements for any product to enter the EU single market. And so here we're talking about material disclosure of what's inside a PV module, for example, but also to some extent carbon footprint declarations, which goes in some way up to the value chain. In the current proposal, up to the cell production level, but if a company can disclose that, can go further up to polysilicon production and even further to the raw material stage. So if a company has the adequate degree of transparency, they would be able to claim a better carbon footprint than their competitors. So it's not just about, as I was introducing before, public acceptance from the public sector and general people, but also for competitiveness reasons, and as well in terms of procurement from large corporate buyers, for example, which are more and more interested in these topics. And finally, the second leg of this regulatory framework is indeed the Net Zero Industry Act, which I think we're going to cover afterwards, in which the Commission is developing ways for promoting EU-based manufacturing. One of the competitive advantage is sustainability of European production, both in terms of environmental sustainability, because we have less carbon-intensive energy mixes, for one, but also more transparency across the supply chain and better social conditions across the supply chain. So I think these are potentially competitive edges for European manufacturers.
Thank you very much, Raffaele. Laura, you've been very patient, thank you, but someone had to be last in line. And just to talk a little bit about your sector, Laura is the Senior Trade and Competitiveness Advisor for Wind Europe. It's a bit late in the day to say such a word, but anyway. I'm going to give you a very simple question. In many respects, it's a simple question. In others, it's actually a very painful question. Can the market alone solve the issues of securing stable supply for your industry and the production of windmills?
Well, my simple answer is no. Well, as a matter of fact, we are struggling for our supply chains currently, and this is a result of 2 years of particularly challenging conditions due to raw material prices increases in the past 2 years, supply chain disruptions. We have also, we can say that the way projects are participate in auctions do not help either, because of the existing framework for auctions in wind energy. There are several ways that we could improve the situation for our supply chains. As a matter of fact, based on the latest EU targets for our sector, we should be having an installed capacity of 420 gigawatt by 2030. But, and this would mean around 30 gigawatt per year until then. But today we can install around 15, 16 gigawatt per year only. So there is a problem. And as a matter of fact, also President Ursula von der Leyen has mentioned that our industry now needs to have some targeted support measures. And we are looking forward to hearing more about the wind energy package we are expecting for the 24th of October. That should possibly tackle those, for us, priority issues, namely the permitting. That is a problem that we share also with the mining industry. So slow permitting and the fact that bottlenecks in the way the administrative processes are performed today have around 80 gigawatt worth of projects stuck in administrative procedures. We have also the auction design, as mentioned, that basically is, we can say today, a pure race to the bottom when it comes to price, because basically the cheapest project wins the auction. And that squeezes the profit margins for turbine manufacturers to negative today. And this then puts further pressure on, all along the supply chains for us. And also the lack of investments today, because we cannot at the moment afford to expand our capacities. We should be producing more turbines, but we should also producing more components. And we are experiencing serious shortages in essential components for a turbine, such as, for example, foundations. There are not enough of them. We have a lot to do in terms of expansion, and the material is not there, or we cannot build it yet today at these conditions. So we are, in fact, in a very challenging situation. And so we are looking also into the Net Zero Industry Act and ways to improve financing, to expand and upgrade existing facilities in Europe.
Laura, thank you very much. I hear lots of common themes here. Change is essential. Change is overdue. We've been slow. There are bottlenecks. We want to overcome these bottlenecks. We need this change to be enabled. It's not only money, but there are trade-offs. And price is the elephant in the room. That's 10 points. So I invite comments. I'm going to ask Nanna Maria first because you were taking such copious notes, and you just happened to be in the middle of the line. Okay. So I'd like you to respond to some of the interventions by the other speakers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So well, I do agree that. Oh, did I miss now? No.
No, you're back.
Okay, I'm back. I do agree that we see some all the same challenges, and I think maybe what we needed to address also is, irrespective of how we overcome the permitting or secure the funding or find the relevant supply chains, it will not be sufficient to do it within Europe. We also need to look outside Europe and figure out how can we secure the relevant offtake, the relevant raw material for these guys, and so I would say that the challenge is bigger than we can even solve here in EU or in Europe. Again, we also see national schemes, national initiatives. The French are building a funding pool for mining projects, Italians doing the same. I think it would be great to see EU provide some stimulating initiatives, ensuring that we have a offtake for the European industry, or secure the raw material for the European industry, and not going down a maybe nationalistic road, but that the EU provides some untied financing for the raw materials, some tied financing to secure that the European technology is also implemented in the projects, and that we look outside the European borders. Yeah.
In no particular order, Niklas.
Yeah, I think it's very obvious here how we see the whole value chain. Is it on?
Can everyone hear Niklas?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's so illustrative, you know. We're looking at that we want to save carbon dioxide emissions in the steel industry amounting to the whole country of Sweden. But in order to do that, we need electricity, renewable electricity production to be built up so we can do this. They need the fossil-free steel in their towers. But it all comes down that this is all connected. And we need this to work. So we can't just look on the demand side and think that this will work. It's just like looking at electric motors in cars, for example, neodymium, praseodymium for permanent magnets. Seriously, in 2035, we cannot sell is it not working again?
It's back again.
No, basically, we cannot use combustion engines 2035. We need electric engines. But how is the supply in order to be able to build those electric engines going to look like? These things are so connected, and we have to start connecting these dots, because otherwise we will not be able to change. And I think we all agree that we need to change. This is not a sustainable situation we're in. So seeing how this connects and actually making sure that we can build up supply, because otherwise demand will not happen, or it will become too expensive, so it won't happen.
I'm going to allow some of the questions from the audience, both in person and on Slido. I hope that everyone online has been able to access Slido. There's a QR code displayed, I believe, on the website or on the app. I'm happy to take questions in person from the audience here if I see you, but I've got the lights in my eyes, so it's a little tricky. So if you would like to raise your hand to give you the opportunity for a full question and answer session. The only request I have of everyone is please identify yourself if you're in the room, so we know who you are. Thank you, sir.
Yes. My name is Stijn Sante. I'm here in my role as the chairman of the Zero Emission Platform Projects Network. So that's about CCS, the session tomorrow. And hearing all these issues for large-scale electrification, I wonder, isn't nuclear energy not the elephant in the room where we don't talk about?
Thank you. Which of our participants would like to answer that? Mark? Go
Yeah,
on.
I
and
can.
then Mark and then Niklas, if you like.
It is the elephant in the room, but it's the elephant in the room because I think there is a divergence of opinions across member states, particularly two important member states. And I promised that I wouldn't get involved in the politics because I'm not a politician, but effectively until that gets resolved between politicians, it will remain the elephant in the room.
Niklas?
It might be in some areas. As a company, what we are looking at is, of course, that we lead a lot of fossil-free energy, electricity, at the cheapest possible price, of course, but it has to be competitive. And for us, we're looking at consuming 70 terawatt hours in 25 years for the change we've embarked upon. That amounts to the whole country of Denmark, just so one realize. So price is, of course, important for us.
Sorry, we're just having a small technical hiccup. If we have other questions in the room,
If you want.
sir, would you identify yourself because I can't
will.
see you, I'm afraid.
Hi, my name is Tony Adam. I work for Nordex. I'd also put my question on Slido, but so I can elaborate a bit where I'm coming from. In the beginning, you were talking about mining and the competitiveness edge mining in Europe might have through sustainability. This is something we're discussing in all industries, whether this is true. And my question is why you think this is a competitive edge, and how long and will not the rest of the world follow, which might be desired, but the competitive edge in the end of the day will be gone.
I found that a little bit difficult to hear. If you could just repeat the central part of your question. The mic isn't great, I'm sorry.
Why do you think sustainability would be of advantage for mining in the EU, and will not the rest of the world follow, and the competitive edge we are thinking now is gone?
Thank you. It's an interesting question. I would like to ask our friends from the renewables sector, as our customers, what you think of that. So Raffaele, perhaps, and then Laura.
Yeah, maybe I can begin. Maybe not just in the scope of the mining, but rather for the whole value chain in Europe. So one thing I like to highlight, as I alluded to before, is the transparency, for sure. In Europe, we have rather high standards that are not necessarily achievable at this point in time in other geographies. It could be in like-minded countries, but that's not always the case. Then one other thing is for sure the cleaner electricity intensity of carbon. Europe has definitely a lower one than many other countries. But ultimately, you are right. So the competitive edge could be lost within a matter of years, possibly. But even more so, if that brings better sustainability across the world, so the so-called Brussels effect, all the better, it will be a new challenge for European production and industry to find new competitive advantages. But in the end, that will clean up the, increase the sustainability performance of our industry. So I think it's something that we have to live with.
So I think most of us would agree that if we saw a virtuous circle of growing standards of transparency, sustainability, and environmental performance, that is only a positive. And if Europe contributes to that, that's part of our role. Laura, do you want to add anything, or can we move on to the next question?
Just to add that indeed it is very difficult to predict if we will be able to give a good example and to be followed on this. So.
Okay, there is a question for you, Laura, there on the Net Zero Act. It's on the screen here, which is the second one down. I think everyone can see it. So would you like to respond?
Sure. Yeah, so the Net Zero Industry Act is in fact being shaped at the moment as we speak. So we do definitely have hopes in this text, although it came already without any funding attached to it, but it still has potential for us in the way, as I mentioned before, renewable energy auctions work today in the European Union. And in fact, for us, one of the main asks within the Net Zero Industry Act is to make the non-price criteria in auctions mandatory for member states' authorities, and to actually increase the weight assigned, the points assigned to this non-purely cost-based criteria, such as sustainability, resilience, or as we can also call it today, made in Europe, and also innovation, and also all other criteria that our companies have already invested in and that are not fully recognized at auction level. And so this should eventually be recognized, and in order to shift away from a cost-based competition in renewable energy projects. And within the Net Zero Industry Act, we also want to see there is in fact a clause in this proposal that would basically allow member states authorities to not make use of non-price criteria in auctions if the cost increase that would result from it would be higher than 10%. And this is something that we strongly oppose, because it would basically too easily disincentivize authorities to look into this non-price criteria. And I think with the solar industry, we do agree on this, that it is a fundamental point within this legislative proposal.
We have 7 minutes left, a short intervention from Raffaele in response. Then I'm going to go to Chris Heron from Euromines, and then I'm going to address about 20 questions for Mark that have come through on Slido. So, Raffaele, please.
Yeah, just very quickly on our side on the Net Zero Industry Act, it's great that the Commission is identifying strategic technologies and put them in the spotlight. Now, having said that, we would also like to see some non-price criteria apply to tenders, perhaps through a segmentation of the tendering schemes across the EU to create the segment that allows for better recognition of sustainability characteristics, resilience characteristics, and so on. But then that needs to come together with the support of the industry itself, of the manufacturing industry, I mean. So a pull and push, in a sense, so from the supply and from the demand. And indeed, financial support will be essential in making sure first that industry is reassured across the supply chain. And as someone said in the opening panel, we're still at less than roughly 1 gigawatt of capacity across the supply chain compared to 40 gigawatts market. And second, that needs to come not only through CapEx, but also through OpEx support, because it's something that makes the investment profitable in the longer term, so sustainable in the longer term.
Chris, over to you.
Thank you. Chris Heron from Euromines, as introduced, Europe's Metals Association. So you mentioned that we need to also get the mine supply from outside of Europe, not just open the local mines, which is of course important. Getting finance for European companies to do that is very difficult today, or if not impossible. Often companies are having to form equity partnerships with Chinese companies, for example, to be viable. So it's maybe a question to both the EIB and to FLSmidth in terms of this global perspective. What needs to change in Europe so we can actually give companies the support they need to have these projects in other jurisdictions, and how can institutions like EIB come to the table?
I'm going to ask Nanna Maria to go first, and then we'll probably spend the remaining 5 minutes battering poor Mark. So.
No, but thank you for the question. I think it's really good. I will, from where I sit, I would like to see that we can, from Europe, go out and support not necessarily European-owned mines. but that we can support these mines outside Europe come online. And it could be with on-tight financing for the offtake, so they get a pre-export loan. That could be provided from EIB or other institutional funds. It can be the ECAs, export credit agencies, stepping up. It can be even the renewable industry that goes out and make long-term offtake contracts. So, but there are many initiatives that could be done. I don't necessarily think that it is necessary for Europe to invest, but we need to partner up with the mines outside Europe. Just like they do, you see the Biden administration eyeing Australian mines, not necessarily investing in them, but making these pre-export facilities to get hold of the raw material. No.
I don't think we have enough time because we've raised so many interesting points. I was hoping we'd have a big conversation about trade-offs, but we've got 4 minutes. So off you go, Mark. You can see the questions as well as anybody.
I can see the question, and I've heard other questions, etc. Right. Interesting. When I attend these events, and I don't get out very often because I have been operational all the way through, I think one of the things that I would say is that I did promise to stay away from the politics, but the fact is that at this point in time there are a huge number of political statements about what the bank is going to do. At a point when we are about to lose one president and a new president who we don't know is coming into play. So I would say that perhaps those two statements are linked. The fact that we are increasingly seeing more and more wish lists. Just to clarify, the bank sees mining as eligible. It sees investments in factories as eligible, provided there is market failure or suboptimal market conditions. So it's not correct to say that we don't do it. However, the bank is a bank, and the projects need to be bankable at the end of the day. It is not a grant-giving organisation. What else? I think in terms of these, what else do we have? Yes, you mentioned the word trade-off. I think in answer to one of the questions about what can the Commission and Member States do to help the EIB do more investments, it has to be an honest, upfront discussion about the trade-offs that are involved. And I think someone mentioned permitting. For example, with the member states, we very frequently hear about how they are very much in support of the Green Deal, in support of all of these things. But when we look at permitting at a project level, it tells a different story, very, very frequently. So an honest debate about the trade-offs, an honest debate from other players who want to see a long list of ticks on what we can and cannot do. If you want, 2 years ago we moved towards becoming the Climate Bank Roadmap. One of the big lessons that we learned from that was the importance of consensus. Now, by consensus, I mean from the politicians through to NGOs. If you are going to aim for consensus, that means that everybody in that space is going to have to compromise as well as demand. So unless there are compromises from each and every player, then it becomes difficult or very, very slow to move forward.
Thank you. Thank you for getting the trade-offs in. I appreciate that. We have 10 minutes for the participants to give us a few concluding remarks, responses to the discussion as a whole, and how you felt the discussion went. You know, criticize me if you want to, but in no particular order. Niklas, would you like to offer us some thoughts?
I think there's an honest debate on trade-offs, like Mark just said, is extremely important, because what we are seeing is, of course, that we are conserving a non-sustainable situation. We're not moving forward at the pace we want. And we see this all the time. Almost all of it boils down to permitting. If we're looking at mining, for example, and which are extremely capital-intensive projects that takes a long time to develop. Just example, when we put in a new permit for our existing mine going forward, it's 8,000 pages. 8,000 pages. Takes years to develop. And at the same time, we all know that we need this change to happen fast. Faster than we're doing today, but we're not seeing the movement. The wind power mills that we hope that will provide the energy for this transition, they don't get permits. So we're sitting here and seeing that, well, we're not moving forward at the pace we need because we're basically conserving a status quo. And from an industry perspective, that's the same as dying as well. There is no status quo. And if we cannot get these things together, we're not going to solve this.
Thank you, Niklas. Along the same theme, I'll ask Laura if I may. Niklas has set out what he thinks is key to allowing better delivery from our two respective supply chains. And we are in many senses the same supply chain. What do you feel from your end, from your perspective, to be key to improve matters as quickly as possible?
Well, I think it's clear, we agree that we want clean and also resilient supply chains for our products. This will require, I think, alignment on the standards that we want across the whole supply chain, long-term planning as well. We do, however, also need for our industry to look into parallel solutions at the same time, because we cannot wait that the European supply is there. So this is one of the issues. And the second one is related to the costs and the price premium. So I think it is key that we do have this kind of discussions on what we want, but we also need to act fast in terms of getting the support we need financially as well from the Commission, from private sector and public sector as well.
Raffaele, along the same lines, we've talked a little bit about unfair competition. We talked about enabling our own actions, funding them, working together, removing obstacles. But we're not alone. This is a global context. So how do we deal with what many people still perceive to be unfair competition, which I believe is a critical area for you?
Yeah, so as I said, it's a matter of supporting both the supply and demand for European products. So what we see is that a good start comes from the Net Zero Industry Act, where solar, among others, is recognized as a strategic technology. But in order to go further, it is a matter of creating short-term support to European manufacturers, which at present are undergoing very hard pressure when it comes to prices. There is an oversupply of modules. Prices are even below production prices at the minute, which means that the gap needs to be bridged somehow. So support on the operational front, on the operational expenses needs to come in the short term, and then in the longer term, you need to create the segment that takes the demand for European products, and that comes through, for example, non-price criteria and the definition of resilience auctions.
Thank you, Raffaele. I'm sorry that we probably need at least another hour. Nanna Maria, you know, in your work, you have to face all of these challenges in all different directions, all at the same time, and compete globally. What are the key issues for you? And I would love to give you half an hour, but it's a couple of minutes.
Well, I think the key issues are many, but what I face on daily basis is, of course, that we look at our customers. I think the challenges here are well defined. We face an increasing demand. We have a shortage in the supply. We need these mines to come online, and we would like to see some instruments being implemented for this to happen. We have a Critical Raw Materials Act. We need multiple actions to follow the implementation of this act and make it real and make it work. So again, I would like to say we are late to the party. But we have no choice, and we need to come up with these solutions quite fast because we are facing a transition, green transition. We are facing a raw material demand. We need the instruments, the permitting, the financial instruments to support this, and decide that we want to do this.
Yeah.
Well.
Thank you. I think you added the right point at the end. There has to be the will and the understanding, recognition of this need for change.
Yeah.
It's fitting that we come to Mark at the end because funding and finance is the thread that binds us all together. And he's a nice fellow anyway. There is a bit of a divergence, a dichotomy, if you like, between political, the policy agenda and investor behavior. You know, we've talked that this is urgent, this is important in all its facets, and we're not seeing particularly equity markets responding to that. You can't expect the multilateral institutions just to come along and be the fire brigade and do everything.
Yeah.
But what should you do? If we look at the IRA, it's not an exercise in creating national champions. It's not an exercise in buying big companies that already exist. What it does is it tries to fit into the gaps that are most crucial to the supply chain. So the question to you, Mark, is working together with the private sector, and a big caveat, what do you think are the most important contributions that the finance sector can make to this effort?
I think, again, I've got to fall back to my observations as a member of staff in the bank. I think the signalling effect in moving forward with the right projects is a very, very important part of it. I think we need to make sure that when we are, I'm just looking at my notes from some of the other sessions, and there were some very, very interesting points in them. But I think that when we are analysing what needs to happen going forward, we need to be honest about it. And I'm not sure that that's always the case. In terms of what the finance sector can do, I know that there has been a number of discussions between the finance sector, with the wider finance sector, not just EBRD and EIB. And the normal message that comes out of that sector when they're talking to the Commission, and they've had a number of discussions earlier this year, is about the need to have a level playing field and a clear definition going forward. One of the key things for the finance industry remains the lack of a taxonomy in this particular sector. If we had that, then I think it would make life an awful lot easier for all of us, because we would all feel that we were playing to a level playing field and that we could pull the rest of the global society into line in a manner in which we can't do at the moment.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for what I consider to be a very good discussion. Appreciate everyone's participation. Thank you to the participants for their questions. I apologize to everyone who we weren't able to get round to. As I said, I don't think we had enough time. But please, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.